As we go into talking about two mean confidence intervals, it's really important to remember that anytime we're talking about two sample, we're actually really concerned with the difference. Keeping this in mind, as we start a confidence interval, let's go ahead and look at step 1. Step 1 with any confidence interval is to list. We'll go ahead and split it up into sample 1 and sample 2. Because I'm dealing with means, I'll list x1 bar, x2 bar, those are the sample averages. I'll list S1 and S2. I'll list N1 and N2. And then once again, because I'm looking at dealing with two samples here, I'll go ahead and list the average as well. So X1 bar minus X2 bar. Now here's what we have to think about for a second. Whenever we're doing a confidence interval, we list our t-score or our z-score in the beginning. And because this is a mean problem, we need to go ahead and list what t is going to be. But in order to find t, we have to have degrees of freedom. Now before, for one sample, our degree of freedom was n minus 1. So the hope would be that our degrees of freedom here would be like n minus 2. Well, it turns out, no, it's not that easy. In fact, it's going to be really complicated, which is why there is an entirely different video to find this degrees of freedom. So for right now, we're going to go ahead and leave this a blank here. Having gone ahead and semi-done step 1, let's talk about step 2. Step 2 is always my calculations. And when I go to do my calculations, I need to go ahead and calculate the one thing that's missing, and that is SE. Remember that for one sample, SE was equal to S over root N, right? So the idea here is just like proportions, I want to be able to combine this for sample 1 and for sample 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write S1 over N1 plus S2 over N2. So I've kind of like taken this idea here and made it so I'm adding them together. Now here's a complicated part. You see how n is square rooted on the bottom? Well, I need to have that n1 and the n2 square rooted. But I want to add them together before I do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and square root the entire thing. The problem with this then is s is not under a square root. So what I need is something to cancel out the square root. And the thing that cancels out a square root is the square. So I have an s1 squared over n1 plus s2 squared over n2. Now, the algebraic reasoning I just gave you isn't exactly why this works, but it's a good way for us to think about it. Now that I've calculated this estimate for my standard deviation, the variation between my samples, we're on to step 3. Step 3 is to go ahead and put my interval together. To find my interval, I take my point estimate, which is the difference. Once again, this is what we call the point estimate. It's the difference I actually found. And I add and subtract my margin of error, which is t times SE. So this will be the steps here that we take to find our confidence interval for 2 mean. Once again, we didn't detail what degrees of freedom was here, and that's because the formula is actually pretty gross for it. So go ahead and check out the other video for that.